I know that it can make a difference in social media, and sometimes you have a hit. Most of the times I have a miss in the sense that I post something and my very closest friends react and nobody else, even if it's something that's interesting. But how to do it and how to make it work for us is something Karina Perez, who's going to moderate the next panel, is going to talk us through. Now, Karina knows her way around politics on the Hill. She's conscious of the biases that are there and that society has against those outside the norm. She's used to handle public policy for a major American city and hosted a great number of panels on pop culture, next to the subjects of science, politics, and diversity, and that I just mentioned. Today, Karina and her panel will let us dive into the social media and what it can do for Mars. Karina and your panel, please come out.
So if you want to just introduce them.
Yeah.
You're on.
Oh, is the mic on?
Thank you.
Perfect. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Well, tonight. I'm already thinking it's tonight. So welcome to the Launching Mars Using Social Media to Inform and Inspire. Before I introduce your amazing panelists, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. So my name's Karina Perez, and I work for the Aerospace Industries Association. Some of you might know it as AIA. I've been hosting similar panels throughout Comic-Cons at Southern California, but I was very excited to be able to do this at Humans to Mars, since it is a passion of mine to inspire the next gen to pursue this type of things. And just a little bit of a background, AIA is actually celebrating 100 years of advocating on behalf of the aerospace industry. And so in honor of that, we released a study called What's Next for the Aerospace and Defense Industry, A Vision of 2050, where we look at the future of the industry, the trends, technologies, and the opportunities we believe will be available. But we really can't get there without inspiring the next generation. We really can't get there without industry and without government working together. And what is best than to use social media to inspire those people and show them what we can actually do? With that said, let me introduce you to these amazing individuals who they will inspire the future generation and get us to Mars. Let me start with Kellie Gerardi, who is an aerospace and defense professional and a popular science communicator. I'm sure you've all seen all her photos and her amazing dresses. She has worked with DARPA, Masten Space Systems, the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, and she serves on the Defense Council for the Truman National Security Project. Her work on bioastronautics research has been featured across a broad range of television and media, including guest appearances on ABC's The View and Nightlife. She also has profiles in Vogue, Popular Mechanics, and the New York Times. Wow. Next we have, we switched up a little bit. We have Raquel Nuno, who is a planetary scientist and science educator at UCLA. She is the creator of The Space Geologist, where she educates her followers on space exploration topics and chronicles her life as a scientist. And on the side, she likes to spend her days providing early astronaut training for her toddlers. I feel like I need to sign up. That is my level of training, so let's talk after
Welcome
this.
anytime.
Then we have Ron Sparkman, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of Stardom, a space media company who I'm sure you've seen throughout all the social media on Explore Mars. He's been running it throughout the week. I think it's the weekend. See where I am now.
We're hoping for the weekend.
Ready for the weekend.
Ready for it, right?
He also was the co-creator of I Love Mars, one of the largest communities of Mars for Mars fans on social media. And last but not least, we have Rich Cooper, who is the Vice President of Strategic Communications and Outreach for the Space Foundation. That is where he leads a team who is working to tell the story of the next great human adventure in space. That's amazing. Prior to joining the Space Foundation in September of last year, he held a senior position at SAS, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Homeland Security, U.S. Department, NASA, and other private sector companies. He's also a frequent media contributor to international, national, and issue outlets that range on plenty of issues, but he's presently the editor-at-large at Homeland Security Today. How do you have any time to do anything?
That and 3 teenagers. On Netflix.
And Netflix.
Netflix, yes.
Perfect. So with all those introductions out of the way, let me start with the questions. One of the most important questions that I'll start with, since it's social media, what's your favorite emoji? I'm kidding. But you will have to answer this. But your first question is, you all work for incredible organizations, and you're like UCLA, Space Foundation, things of that nature. But how do you get here, and how did you choose to focus on science communication?
So I can kick us off, and in the spirit of social media and being like totally transparent, I'm going to let everyone know that I have a microphone tucked into my Spanx right now. So if I'm shifting uncomfortably, that's what's going on. But so thank you for the kind introduction, and it's so awesome to be here. So like Karina said, I started out in aerospace and defense and stumbled my way onto social media and found a lot of like-minded folks along the way. Personally and professionally, I have always dedicated myself to expanding our footprint in the solar system. On the professional side, that's working with companies like Maston and perfecting precision landing technologies for that future pinpoint landing on Mars. On the personal side, it was bioastronautics research and testing spacesuits, being a part of the publishable research that will help us advance our footprint in the solar system. And social media has been the way that I've been able to bring everyone along for the ride and also start to moving from the popularity of social media to the influence of social media and using that to really try to advance some outcomes that we're trying to see. Get in the door to the people who are decision making, really influence the public to understand why space is not only exciting, but it's also essential. And so that's really, I'm looking forward to the discussion. I know we'll have time for questions at the end, but that's sort of my entree to social media.
Yeah, I can, just to add on to that, I think that's a really good way to try to influence the future. But for what I saw for me was I was trying to educate my students. And then I saw a quote somewhere that said that over 68% of US adults were getting the news from social media. And so to me, I'm trying to disseminate information. I'm trying to tell people about the science research that we're doing and the exciting things that are happening in space. And I thought, well, if people are consuming that information online through social media, I can help. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I can put out the true information and the correct information, and then people will consume it that way. So for me, I came at it from, I know that's where people are consuming news, and if I can help put out good news out there, that's what I want to do.
For me, it was everything that I've done has been based around social media. My DJ career took off because I was able to utilize social media to get my name out there, present myself in a way that I hadn't been able to before. So once I figured out I was able to utilize that, once I fell in love with space and science, I'm the only person on this stage that probably doesn't have a degree in space and science yet. Yeah, well, see, and that's it. It has allowed me to have a voice and say, I know that I don't understand these things. Where am I going to go? That was the basis of Stardom when I started it. I watched Cosmos and said, okay, now what? What do I do after this? I'm obsessed with this. And I jumped into the next thing and tried to watch The Inexplicable Universe by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I didn't understand any of it. What's a quark? What are these things? And so I jumped from one side to the other. And I wanted to put together a list of the things that I did that would allow me to get the information that I got out to other people. So once that happened, I utilized social media, and it started building up from there. And then I realized that there's a lot of people out there like me who are nerdy that want to ask these people questions and want to start out somewhere. So many of these interviews that are done are complex, and why not start out with asking somebody like Alan Stern, what is a planetary scientist? So that way people can find out about these things and understand what they are. She educated me a few moments ago about the fact that it's no longer called astrogeology. It's changed. It's planetary geology. It's awesome. How many people don't know that? So that was kind of the thing, the basis for me, that I figured there's a way for me to get that information out there.
We're all products of our environment, and as the old guy here on the stage, I remember life before social media, particularly when it comes to communicating a lot of the different programs. And I remember in my early portion of my career as a NASA contractor and working with some highly technical programs, and a lot of the materials that we would be given again, you often needed a PhD to kind of go through some of this. But whenever you had to take that program and either get it in front of the media to generate coverage or to get public interest, or for that matter to get support for it on the Hill, you really had to condense this down into means that would help people understand why a particular congressman and his district would benefit from a particular investment. And I think social media has been that great decentralizer, that great equalizer that is forcing a lot of technical audiences to, boil it down to how regular people can understand it. I often call this the sweet potato conversation that we often have at our Thanksgiving table, to where you see that older aunt and she looks at you and says, "Ron, what do you do for a living?" And pass the sweet potatoes. Now, the answer that Ron would give to something like that would be different than what would be maybe posted on LinkedIn or something, or some other sort of formal environment. Or if you're here in Washington, you wouldn't be giving your aunt the OMB response or the congressional testimony. You would be very candidly and politely, I'm sure, Ron, explain to her, well, I connect people to science through multimedia. And okay, I understand what that is. And it is a huge humanizing element of this to help people allow themselves to participate in it. And when I see social media as it is a necessary tool to obviously connect to your audience, but it is also a tool that you've got to be inherently responsible with as well. Particularly, there's lots of people who will give, whether it's fake news or misinformation or not being fully informed. You have to be prepared to make sure that you can explain this in terms that are real, that have facts and have that information, and be prepared to be that advocate. Social media is going to require you to be that full-time sentry and advocate for whatever the issue may be.
Well, I'm very glad you brought up, because a lot of your jobs is to translate very complicated topics and issues in very small snippets. You have a tweet, you have an Instagram story, you have a Snapchat story, you have a 4-minute video. What type of content really helps you to translate all these topics to the general public?
So for me, I'll start. As a planetary geologist, I'm kind of lucky because we have really amazing images from NASA missions. And so the public really engages with those. So when I do post pictures of like, hey, this is the mission that I'm working on. So I work on the NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and we have amazing images from the camera on board looking at all these different features at the surface. So we have like craters and little mountains, and people just get really excited about that. And then showing them, for example, we have the same thing here on Earth. The basalt that we see on the moon is the same type of basalt that's coming out of Hawaii. So images I find very, very important when I'm trying to share information with people, and they really engage with that. And bringing it back to the Earth, showing that Earth has very similar things happening on it that are on other planetary bodies, people really resonate with that.
No one can beat the space community for visuals. We inspire Hollywood.
Hubble.
Literally. And Hubble is literally an instrument that rewrote every astronomy textbook ever. But again, it was the images that sort of unfolded the larger imagination. People were connected to it in ways that, again, if there were an astronomer that had to explain Hubble to a group of folks and didn't give any images, it would be a really boring conversation. And people would not be able to connect. But the minute that you show them the image and recognize that this is out there, it's part of our universe and we're connected to it, there is that immediate connection. And that's where, again, Dr. Tyson has given the speech about we're all made of space dust in that particular way. It's a humanizing piece that, again, makes people feel a larger part of their universe and have that connectivity.
And on the human side, I encourage all the companies that I work with to showcase their workforce too. And it's something that I do on my personal channels. It's not just always the space images, it's me as a woman in the space industry. You can wear glitter Gucci shoes and still train for spaceflight, right? This isn't, what society tells us are the more frivolous parts of our personalities aren't mutually exclusive. And representation is just so important, and we as an industry have so far to go. If we want to convince the rest of the world that this this is important and that this is critical for the species, we as an industry have to be reflective of the rest of the species and show that we have, all a diversity of viewpoints, of people, of everyone. So, that's one area that I plug into very deeply on social media and make it a point to surface the viewpoints and the expertise of underrepresented communities in space and show that this is for everyone. There are folks who you can find a role model in across the industry, across every discipline.
Kellie's point is really powerful because if you've not seen the video that came out this week that NASA put out about the Artemis program and going back to the moon, that video does an incredible job of highlighting the diversity of the space community that is forging this new adventure. Now, again, there's a wonderful film. It's at the Smithsonian number of science centers that has redigitized the 70 millimeter footage of seeing the Apollo 11 mission. And it's really cool to see mission control and what was state of the art, but you're looking at a room full of white guys in white shirts and dark ties and pocket protectors, one woman in the entire room, no one else there in color. But you look at into the workforce, watch any SpaceX launch or watch any other type of launch, and you look at the mission control, and there are students of anywhere in the world can see people that look like them now. And that is very, very powerful to put out so that every kid, parent, taxpayer, whomever they might be, sees themselves reflected in their space program. And that's what I think will make the next journey back to the moon even more exciting. Yes, we've been there, done that, but now there's more people that look like everybody else that are part of it than ever before.
For me, it's been, I am my team, and I am the people that I interview. I get to, go on and nerd out with the best scientists in the world, and I don't have that degree, so I'm going to be asking the things that I want everybody else wants to know. Where does this come from? How do we understand these things? I am fascinated by that stuff. But to find somebody that works with that I work with at the Astronomical Society, to find a father and son that have the ability to communicate what it is to be in an astronomical society, to play around with the telescope. What are the ways that we can utilize this? How can I do something, create something, produce something that allows somebody to connect to it? A 14-year-old kid sees another 14-year-old kid teaching them about astronomy. They want to get involved with it. It's a father and son. Now it's something that's a family activity. And you can take away all those things of, I want to go out and I want to buy a telescope, a $1,000 telescope. No, get a star map, go outside, get into some dark skies. Don't be afraid to go to your astronomical society. And then it's very similar of utilizing very much the people that are on the stage, of asking someone like Kellie, and we're talking about Project Possum and Possum 13, these projects that are out there, break it down, give us what these things are, because I never thought I could have any sort of dealings with an astronautics program. And now I'm part of one of the best ones in the world, and the diversity is amazing. Alyssa Carson just turned 18. She speaks 4 languages, and she's doing all these amazing things. She inspires me. We're sitting there and doing our homework. I'm doing my pre-calculus, and she's doing physics, calculus-based physics. And then we're all going to get on a micro-G flight later. And I get to do something like that, knowing that I have that ability, and sharing that with people allows them to see what's possible for them. If I can do it, some goofball DJ, why can't you do it? Why can't you go out there and create something? And I think the stories that are around us are what's most important to get out there. And of course, there's the fun stuff like the videos and social media curation of Hubble pictures and those things. But it's all about the stories and the diversity of people and ages, faces that are out there.
And I think it all comes back down to the human connection. And social media does a great thing where you can automatically connect with these people. You can have an interaction. You can ask those questions and see people who look like you within the industry, something that you might not see mainstream, but social media does a really great job of translating. And I highly recommend you all follow everyone on the stage because they do provide that content. And on that, I want to ask, has there been any interaction that has stuck with you from social media? And because you do have those direct interactions with people.
I'll share just one funny story when I was totally unused to getting media attention. This is before I ever did television or anything like that. So years ago, I was doing a rotation at the Mars Desert Research Station, and I was with a crew from JAXA and NASA, and we did a lot of really exciting research, but the thing that stuck with us, and the thing that's still on my Wikipedia page, is that we were the first team to academically prove that you could produce beer on Mars. Okay, so that was our claim to fame. And all of a sudden, we got this mass media attention, like this little team in the middle of the desert in nowhere. None of us were savvy enough to know what was coming. And so I got a phone call from Playboy. And the woman is on the phone, this is after a rotation, and she was talking to me, she was like, we want to do a feature on you. And already I'm like putting down my croissant. I'm like, okay. And then, partway through the conversation, I'm like already rationalizing in my head, okay, my career's taken a turn, but I'm going to go with it. And she clarifies, no, we want you in the full spacesuit. Like, so there I was, visor down in a spacesuit, like the most covered woman to ever appear in Playboy. And so that has just stuck with me for years, and is still, it's a joke that now my parents always remind me how proud they are of my choices.
And your parents are very proud of that particular appearance.
Yeah.
I will say, yeah.
For me, I think mine was it's definitely a personal one. Having a brand and being able to reach out across the world. This young woman had gotten a hold of me. Her name's Yumna Majid, and she is from Pakistan. And her story is incredible that as a teenager, she said that she wanted to start doing outreach in her community, and it was something that was somewhat frowned upon. And she just kept working and kept working and kept working. And I get so many messages from people, and you don't really know. You get somebody that has somewhat broken English trying to get a hold of you, and it's okay. What or who is this person? Are they even real? Is this just some weird thing? And there was something about it, and to hear her story and the way that she has grown, and she has now created her own organization, and she's done all these things. And before she had a personal loss in her life that I know that was really rough for her, and kind of, I think it was one of the things that kept her going, and she keeps facing those challenges. And to watch her do that kind of has helped me get through like my tough patches whenever I've had that kind of connection, to be able to do that, to inspire somebody on the other side of the world that I have nothing. I would have never thought I had anything in common with. Like, I want to get on a plane and go visit her. We've talked about this stuff about possibly filming and doing some of the things we've been doing there. Let me tell your story. I would love to see somebody do very similar to what Anthony Bourdain did with connecting space and science to culture the way that he did it with food and culture. Show these people that are, Pranvera, I can't say her last name right, unfortunately, but she's done an amazing thing where she's done space and astronomy outreach in a country, and it has gotten to such a point that she got to stand in front of her government and ask them for money to build something that will teach space science to her country, and they said yes. She's achieved a dream, and she's in her 20s. And she started with just a telescope and a local outreach. Those stories are incredible, and a lot of that came from her social media presence. I think USA Today has written a story on her. There's so many stories out there like that, and it's amazing to be even in that conversation.
I have a much smaller reach than probably all of you guys. So for me, like I get messages from parents. So I also highlight my life as a mom in science, and that's really important to me, that I'm a woman and I'm a mom, but I'm also a scientist. Usually scientists are portrayed as this one facet of just dude in a white coat and not working with anyone else. And so I try to highlight, no, that's just, science is just one side of my life. There's lots of other things that I'm interested in. And I've had other parents tell me, oh, I show your stories to my daughter every day. She loves seeing a scientist doing what they do every day. She loves knowing that you can be a scientist and you can be a woman and you can have a life outside of it and you can have a family. And that's something that's often not portrayed in traditional media, in movies or TV shows. It's changing, it's definitely changing, but it's so varied. The field is so varied that it's really nice to get those messages saying that I'm inspiring a little girl to going into science because she sees herself as a scientist, because she also wants a family, she wants kids one day, and she thought that she'd have to choose between the two. And this is something that you do really wonderfully as well through your social media channels.
Just a huge plus one to that. That is so important. I also have an 18-month-old at home. Her name is Delta V, so very, very, I mean, it goes deep. But yeah, it's like we were just talking right before the panel that being a woman and and a mom in science is like, the Schrodinger's cat of motherhood. You have to parent like you don't have a job, and you have to work like you don't have a family, and that's never showed. Like what the mess that looks like behind the Instagram filter is me and my husband screaming at each other because a flight was delayed and our nanny isn't supposed to stay past 6, and we're like, what are we gonna do with the baby? And that kind of mess behind the scenes. So it's so important that everyone shows what that looks like, and you can achieve it. It takes work, but it's possible.
Use that authenticity, the genuineness, if you can. We all show, social media can be the thing that allows you to show the highlights of your life. It allows you to put on a different mask, but the most reaction I'll get is whenever I take the time to say, hey, a few years ago, I was out here, I was living this life. I had no desire to go back to school for anything. And because of a TV show, which is hysterical, I went back, got my GED and part of an astronautics program. I have this platform and I'm able to do these things. And absolutely every person that works for me is smarter than me, more educated than me, 15 years younger than me. And they're all doing these amazing things, and I get to help them share the stories that they're saying because of this platform that I have. And it's incredible to be able to connect with, except for, I met Rich because of what I was doing with social media, and I know these two because of social media. And actually, everybody on this platform really is pretty much from social media, and that is a game changer. There was no way that I could have been in this conversation years ago, and now I get to be a part of it. That's, if I can, then again, to plant that flag yet again, is that anybody can. And that's what's so important about it, is that everybody has a place. The artists have a place. The designers have a place. Everybody can be a part of it. Find your place and tell your story, because you might inspire somebody else. You have no idea. Look at Janet.
The International Space Station is the greatest engineering feat we've ever done. Number of nations coming together to put all those pieces together in orbit, 20 years in operation, doing some really incredible science. Best minds in the world making something like that happen. But it took a father and son to deliver what I think was the most humanizing piece of the entire space station mission. Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield, with his son, did a music video of David Bowie's classic Space Oddity, Major Tom. And I remember Monday morning driving to work and hearing about something on the radio about there's a new version of Major Tom and it comes from the space station. And that video that went out was put together by clips that Chris had shot on camera, sent to his son via email. His son put it together. They upload this, and a version of a song that everyone in the space community knows. It has an entirely new set of fans, and it is showing this man in a tin can, as the song goes, on that type of journey. Now, I'm sure David Bowie's copyright attorneys and the record label were all ready to file any number of injunctions to, file copyright infringement. And David Bowie, God bless him, called off the attorneys and said, no, this guy gets it. That particular type of video, I think, did more to humanize the mission on board Space Station than anything that's been done. Now, again, we've had lots of fabulous downlinks to schools and to legislatures and everything else. Those are all great, but when you take a song that crosses generation, made by a cultural icon, by an international astronaut with an international crew going around the world, how can you not feel connected to that? Exactly. And again, it was nothing that was planned by NASA or anybody else. A father on orbit, a son on the ground did that. And I think that is truly one of the most humanizing space pieces that has ever been done, period. And that'll be hard to top.
And it's a thing about bringing those images to people, making that connection. And it kind of makes me think about the fact of how the access to space has changed. Not just in general of launching, because access to space has changed in that manner as well, but the access to space for the regular person. Now you take out your phone and you can get a tweet from an astronaut in the International Space Station. They can directly go into your classroom via a web chat. But before, as you mentioned earlier, we hosted an event for the Apollo 11 mission, the Apollo 11 documentary, and I learned that there was a nightly broadcast, and people tuned in, and you had to tune in. But now you get it immediately. I wonder, what do you guys think it's going to happen as we move forward with both technology, social media, and our different space missions? How do you think those connections are going to be made, and how the technology will influence that?
As the old guy on the panel, I'm going to raise my hand and get to go first and say the way it used to be. I'm not 60, but over 60 years ago, Life magazine had an exclusive relationship with NASA and the astronauts. They had first access to the families and what was going on. There are these marvelous Life magazine issues. I've got them in my own collection. I know that you, as we were talking, you've got them as well. It gave you this absolutely beautiful, blow-dried, perfectly, the dog, the white picket fence, the perfectly tended yard. It showed you everything was just great with the original 7 astronauts and then the next 9 and everything else. That was, again, an exclusive type of relationship. That will never happen again for a lot of different reasons. And this past week, we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the first tweet from space with Mike Massimino, okay? We've been doing this now 20 years, and now you can only imagine where this is going to end up going, because we're having people on crew who are regularly updating what's going on, connecting to classrooms, let alone their families. This is going to be a challenge, not just for the governments and the companies that are involved, but it's going to be a absolute, I will call it, brand centric type of effort to pay attention to curating that brand, being vigilant and looking about it. How this is going to be incredibly decentralized going forward, but it's going to be a much more immersive experience that we get to go along for the ride. For years and years and years, whenever you saw a shuttle launch, you only saw it from the angles of the cameras, but now we put a camera on the back of the external tank, turn it upside down, and it was if you were belted to the external tank and taking off, what would it look like? Well, you finally got that look. Well, now we're being able to capture all of these other images that we get to go along for the ride. And when you think about virtual reality and you think about all the other immersive technologies, hey, wouldn't we all like to go on that ride? We're not going to be able to do that. And that is where the human condition is always about exploring and feeling connected. We get to be a crew member, and that's unparalleled.
And I'll just add, I hope we do all get to do that. I think with the advent of the commercial spaceflight industry in particular, the democratization of access to space, that is a game changer. I mean, not only for scientists and academics to be able to finally afford to fly some of their payloads and experiments in representative environments in spaceflight, but also for folks like us, for anyone in this room. Yeah, it might be cost prohibitive today for many of us, but it's not out of reach. The same as a down payment on a home or something, and it'll continue to come down. And as we continue to democratize access to space, to expand Earth's economic sphere, I think we're really going to have the possibility for average citizens to experience spaceflight, to experience the overview effect, to know what that's like and to see themselves in that environment and to experience it.
I think that what I see NASA doing, they're really leaning into the social media side. NASA does these things called NASA Socials, where they invite what they call influencers, so people who have a social media presence, to come out to their sites, to go to launches, to talk to scientists, and they're reaching an audience that they probably have never been able to reach before. They get dancers with millions of followers on Instagram to come out and cover, as journalists would, the launches and the different science that's happening at NASA. And I think that that's really powerful. And I think that they're really leaning into social media. Whereas before, people were more apprehensive. I'm like, well, you don't want to put the wrong information out there. We got to be careful. We got to tell the right story. We can't show the mistakes. But people resonate with the stories. I think the thread in all this panel is how powerful storytelling is, and that's what people listen to stories. Even just an image might be, if there's no story behind it, it kind of loses the excitement and the wonder. And so social media really lets you do that, to tell a story and to bring people along, like you said, and even in immersive experiences along for the ride. Yeah.
I think with, and Kellie makes a great point, we're all going to be able to have the chance to probably go to, well, hopefully we're all going to have the chance to at least go to suborbital space. Making that affordable, the first one of us that, goes, that was a somewhat average person and does a Facebook Live on the edge of space to kind of tell the flat earthers what we think about them. You have that chance to be able to get out there and show it. It's real people now. There's nothing behind me saying that I'm trying to perpetrate a lie or anything like that. To be able to do that, to utilize what we have to show everyone what's really out there. As soon as we normalize this idea that any and all of us can be a part of the spacefaring culture, that changes everything. Once more and more people are doing it, it's no longer astronauts, it no longer feels elite, that you have to be a genius to be able to do these things, that all of us can go and be a part of that. That changes it all. One of the ideas that I heard, let's jump forward a little bit, of going to Mars is the idea of augmented or virtual reality, that what if there's a camera on the first astronaut that lands on Mars, and as they walk out, you have the ability to, in VR, take those steps with them. That would be mind-blowing. There was an AT&T commercial that said, where will you be? And it shows somebody on a phone watching, somebody walk out on Mars. There's a giant TV screen. You see them, and everybody's seeing, everybody is in it together around the world. It connects people and connected us in ways we can't even imagine. I think it's not just what we can think will happen, it's that we have no idea what that's going to look like between now and hopefully 2033.
Wow. Well, I mean, even now, we have people, if you look around, there's around 6 live streams going on that connect us directly to people. And space, especially now, is that type of way where if I want to watch a launch, I just pick up my phone and watch it underneath my desk, so people think that I'm doing work.
It's funny you use that example. Several weeks ago at the Goddard Memorial Dinner, the young woman who was the keynote speaker, she was part of a smallsat or CubeSat team in California. She's graduating high school, on her way to Stanford, going to do absolutely amazing things. Talked about the CubeSat that was being launched by SpaceX. She was in her 3rd period Spanish class watching her payload launch on SpaceX. I'm thinking of all the things I was doing in my 3rd period Spanish class way back when. We certainly didn't have a phone. That was done in the faculty lounge, of course, if you were there, had access to it. But holy cow, this kid is interrupting I would have interrupted anything going in a lesson. My payload is going up now, and being able to do that, that's wonderful. But another point that goes with capturing, we've all talked about all the good things, but there are also the other aspect that, and this goes with the challenge, and this is where I really have to give a shout out to the SpaceX team. I was meeting with a member of the SpaceX team a couple weeks ago, and we were sort of talking about social media and the various platforms and communicating with people. And they shared the most downloaded and the most watched video out of the SpaceX library of launches is the video that they encapsulated all of their anomalies. The failures, the rockets that didn't land where they were supposed to land, or land.
Reel.
It was the unscheduled disassembly.
Yes, the unscheduled disassemblies. And again, failure is hard for anybody to accept, but when you do it in what is a very public atmosphere, which social media only amplifies, makes it even a more challenging way to navigate. Elon and his team, I give a lot of credit to that. They didn't make excuses. It was there. It assembled much faster or it disassembled in ways they didn't want it to be. But they put those failures out there to share them, to help them understand that there is hard science behind this. There's a lot of work that's got to go into this. We're going to get smarter as a result of these things. It's not always perfect. And that is, I think, a big challenge I think everybody has seen in social media. It's not always perfect. And I know that's hard for a lot of companies, that you always want to show things are perfect. But in this environment, I've got to give a shout out to SpaceX and other companies who have made sure those failures were out there, but didn't ignore them or try to gloss them over. This is hard stuff, and it is challenging stuff, but we learn from our failures.
And I think that is one of the things is that social media is not just inspiring people to join the industry, but the industry itself is changing because of social media. And a lot of companies are way more open about their workforce, who they have, what they do. I think I've seen Aerojet Rocketdyne and their CEO constantly go to their facilities and talk to their people, what they're actually doing, and demystify a lot of what it is to be in the industry, and opening up the door to what everybody does. It's not just individuals now. I think now the companies themselves are learning about, hey, let me open the door through social media for people to know exactly what we're doing.
Right.
And on that note, I'll let you guys have some closing remarks so we can have a couple of minutes of Q&A.
Well, I would like to go off of that. I think you make a great point, is that the voices are within your company. Emily Calandrelli had an incredible, she closed Hall of Fame last year with her talk, directly telling everybody in there, you need to find the voices in your company and let them tell your story, because they're going to be able to connect with you. Everybody remembered, Bobek for what he did with, hey, it's the guy crying with the mohawk. And if you don't follow him on social media, the man is incredible. He's always sharing amazing things. Emily shared her story of her and her husband are having a child, and she launched it and told the world about it. And she shared the initial reaction when she flipped over the pregnancy test. And what she looks like, it's making me kind of tear up now. I've got chills again. We all feel connected to people because of that. We feel connected to her. We feel that her story. And to kind of touch on what Rich said, we've got to go the opposite. We've got to try to stop acting that failure is a bad thing. Fail over and over and over again. Talk about it all the time, because you learn so many lessons from it. I am nothing without my failures. I wouldn't be where I'm at today. If I had succeeded in everything I wanted to do, I wouldn't be here now. I would probably not even care about the space industry. If I wasn't in possibly the worst place in my life whenever I was watching Cosmos, there's no way that I get in the space industry. I'd be fine playing on some decks and goofing off and doing what I was doing. That changes the game, and it allowed me to be able to interact and be able to work with people like Kellie on an amazing program like Possum 13 that's inspiring women in STEM kids to be able to go out there and possibly fly something in a micro G flight. That's a game changer for somebody's life out there, and to be a part of that, there's none of that without social media and being able to tell my story.
Yeah, and closing thoughts for me is, I bet every single one of you in this room is known as the space person in your own families and communities. It's a differentiator. Like, even being at this conference, I'm sure everyone in your network is like, wow, he or she, I don't know what they do, but it's so freaking cool. And, use that, like leverage that. You are a space influencer, every single one of you, but, use it to affect change and outcomes, bring people into the conversation. Social media drives politics. Politics drives space policy. We don't have space programs without the will of the people, and the people live on social media. Use your powers wisely.
I just want to say people are hungry for information. People are hungry for science information, for science topics. So give it to them. Social media is such a unique opportunity to do that, and do that well, telling your stories, telling your employee stories, and share your failures, like both of you mentioned. It's a very awesome opportunity that companies have to do. Yeah.
You're a brand. Every one of you is a brand, and how you curate that brand is in your hands. When you see the iconic brands that we all recognize, the Hershey's, the Coca-Colas, even the NASA meatball, those brands come up visually to you. They bring a number of thoughts and ideas that come to you. Same thing with the social media feed. And that's where, again, being a responsible steward of your brand is critically important, particularly as you go into this arena and connect with other people. If you're not going to curate your brand and you're not going to look after it, there are lots of people who will, impugn and soil your brand. You have to be that steward 24/7, 365, 366 every 4 years, we know. But the point being, you have to take responsibility on that. And that's owning the good with the bad. If you make a mistake, own up to it and move forward on it. But being humble and being honest about it is going to really be impactful.
So we have one question over there.
Yeah, thank you all for this amazing discussion about communication, and I know I've personally learned so much from you guys. My question pertains to this idea of any and all of us, really to the global community that I think each and every one of you have talked about. This is Humans to Mars Summit. It's not, America to Mars. And my question is, what is your guys' role in connecting with the global community? So with nations that aren't necessarily represented by a big space agency or a lot of money or anything like that. Thank you.
I'm going to take a stab at that. Space Foundation, we host every year the annual Space Symposium. This year we had over 15,000 people show up in Colorado Springs from 40 different countries. I mean it when I say to my team and at the Space Foundation, we get to be the storyteller of the next great human adventure in space. That's NASA, but that's everybody else. That is also commercial. That is academic. That is across the sphere. That is building relationships with those persons and inviting them in to share their story. Lots of countries have space programs, but they may not have human programs that are launching their citizens up in space. They may be going up on other nations there. But when you take a look at what the Japanese have been doing as far as going out and touching asteroids and doing those types of work, let alone the new Chinese lander on the moon, all of these countries are doing things a little bit differently. And when you can share the same passion to explore things, but see how people do it differently, it starts a great conversation. And I think one of the things that I took away from my space symposium experience is being able to sit down and talk to those people and see how they do what they do. And their spacesuits look a little differently. Their missions are planned a little bit differently. Their mission controls are different too. Why is that? And it's a great conversation starter. And the more conversations you can have, and social media allows us to connect to those things and share those stories in ways that might otherwise not get any attention. I think the Chinese have even learned, as they have had their lander out there, the power of the images that weren't just necessarily in instilling their own national pride, but letting the world see, what else can be discovered of what's going on the moon. And they've made some pretty phenomenal discoveries of what they've done. Creates a great conversation.
And I think also space is for everyone. And when we go somewhere as humans, not a country, when the U.S. landed on the moon, it was everyone. It was a U.S. effort, but we can all connect. It's back to that human connection. Yes, countries are working tirelessly to do their work, but ultimately it's us working. It's humans working there. So we have time for one last question.
If it's short, we can do two. We got 2 minutes.
I'm gonna do two.
So
All
right,
we'll
so-
try to do one and one.
I work at a children's STEAM museum, and we focus our programming on elementary students.
Yeah.
And I'd like to be able to engage older students, high schoolers and middle schoolers who maybe lost interest at in STEAM at some point. And how could you guys suggest that we use our social media presence to attract the older kids?
So a couple things, I can take this one quickly. Absolutely. Research latest has shown that in particular young girls between 11 and 15 is where they lose interest in science and math for a variety of societal and factors. However, what I think the power of social media can do is reach out to people who you think might engage with them. Someone like me, maybe it's not me, maybe it's someone like Raquel who has a background in something like planetary geology, but reach out. I think you'll find that almost all of us are immediately responsive and wanting to engage. Happy to visit schools. I do a million Google Hangouts with different classrooms all the time, just chatting about where do you see yourself? What planet would you want to go to if you could go anywhere? Those are so rewarding. And I think if you take the time to reach out to folks who you think might help, you'll be surprised in finding how many of us are super responsive and willing to do that.
And I think one last thing is reminding them that being in the space industry or being in a STEM industry doesn't necessarily mean you need to have a STEM degree. there is plenty of jobs that are within the industry. You can work in policy, communications, anything and everything you can think of is a part of making the mission happen.
And if I can make a real quick point, one of the things I do all the time, every time I'm in a new city, I'm in a new place, I go on Stardom and I go to the museums and I run around and show the stories and I goof off and show those things. One of the best places, absolute best places that you're gonna see where children are absolutely engaged, their phones are down, is a science museum. Watch them running around Perot, American Museum of Natural History, all these things. There's all these places that they can go to, and they're so connected with it. It shows that they love space and science. Show those things. Use your Instagram stories. Use your Snapchat. Use that. Use you know, what you are, the personality, and what you're seeing every day. Those things that are inspiring.
We are now being played off like at the Oscars and the Grammys. So before we go, just quickly say your social media handles where they can find you.
Well, I was going to say, can I use my time and let this guy ask a quick question?
We are over time, but
Thank you.
sorry about that. We'll be around.
Find us after.
Yeah, we'll be around. You can find us after.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So quickly, social media handles.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of those things. God, I don't remember them all at this point, but they're all over there. Yeah, and I'll be around afterwards and happy to share a card. I've got it all on my business card.
At Stardom Space, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then on Instagram at the Space Bro.
Instagram, The Space Geologist, and then LinkedIn and Facebook, and what else is there? Yeah, Twitter, yeah, Raquel Nuno, just my name.
And just Kellie Gerardi across all platforms.
Follow AIA Speaks. They're a little bit more interesting and I give them content.
And I promise we will put it up on our website of Explore Mars so you can find them. Fair enough?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.